What would you do if your sister kept having children and somehow they always ended up becoming your responsibility? Imagine celebrating pregnancy announcements while secretly knowing another sleepless year is about to begin. That's exactly what happened here. Four kids were already being raised under the same roof, while their own mother lived freely without consequences. Then the fifth pregnancy was announced, and that's when something finally broke. Because behind those pregnancies, disturbing secrets had been hiding for years. Late-night phone calls, mysterious business trips, a husband whose behavior never quite matched the story everyone believed. Slowly, the truth started revealing itself, and it changed everything. This story isn't just about family sacrifice. It's about betrayal, manipulation, and the moment someone finally refuses to carry a burden that was never theirs to begin with. Stay with this channel as the shocking truth unfolds, and trust me, the ending will leave the entire family speechless. For years, the same announcement arrived wrapped in laughter and congratulations, yet it always carried the same quiet consequence. Another pregnancy, another celebration, another moment when every pair of eyes in the room slowly drifted in the same direction, silently deciding who would be responsible once the excitement faded. At first, it felt natural to help. Family was supposed to show up for each other. When the first baby arrived, bottles were warmed in the middle of the night and tiny socks were folded beside the crib without a second thought. When the second child came along, the routine had already settled in like a permanent shadow. Diapers, school lunches, doctor appointments, bedtime stories. Responsibilities multiplied, while gratitude slowly disappeared. By the third pregnancy, the pattern was impossible to ignore. Each announcement came with loud joy from relatives who never planned to lift a finger afterward. They cheered from the sidelines while the real work quietly landed on the same doorstep again and again. The house filled with toys that didn't belong there, with backpacks lined against the wall every morning before school, with small voices calling for help with homework long after midnight exhaustion had set in. Meanwhile, the real parents lived differently. Weekends turned into parties, spontaneous trips, and endless excuses about needing a break. The children stayed behind, clinging to the only stability they knew. Over time, their confused questions started cutting deeper than any sleepless night ever could. Even more unsettling was the silence surrounding the husband. A man who should have been present slowly became a ghost in the story. Work trips stretched longer than necessary, phone calls were taken in private rooms with locked doors, conversations ended the moment anyone else stepped inside. At first, those details seemed like ordinary marriage problems, nothing unusual, nothing worth confronting. But little cracks always start small before they reveal something far darker underneath. The fourth child arrived with the same celebration and the same quiet expectation. By then, exhaustion had turned into something colder, something sharper, a feeling that the entire family had grown comfortable with sacrifice that was never theirs to carry. And somewhere, beneath the noise of crying babies and bedtime routines, a quiet realization began to form. None of this had ever been an accident. The words came out casually, almost playfully, as if announcing a weekend vacation instead of a life that would soon depend on someone else. "I'm pregnant again." For a moment, the room exploded with applause. Glasses clinked together, laughter echoed across the dining table. Someone shouted congratulations, while another relative rushed forward for a hug. It looked like a celebration anyone would expect from a big, loving family. But underneath the noise, something colder settled into the silence between heartbeats. Everyone in that room already knew how the story would end. Four children were already part of the same routine, four little lives who had slowly found stability under one roof while their own mother floated in and out of responsibility like a visitor. Each pregnancy had started with the same excitement and ended with the same quiet arrangement. After the baby arrived, excuses would appear. Work would suddenly become overwhelming. Personal freedom would somehow become urgent. And eventually, the children would arrive with overnight bags that never truly went back home. The oldest had already stopped asking when things would change. Instead, Small hands simply helped with the younger ones, mimicking the routines they had watched for years. Homework happened at the same kitchen table, bedtime stories were read in the same familiar voice, doctor appointments were scheduled by someone who wasn't supposed to be the parent. Meanwhile, the real mother continued living as if motherhood were optional. But something else had started to feel wrong lately. The husband's reactions had become strangely distant. Instead of the excitement a father might feel, there was always a brief hesitation in his eyes before the forced smile appeared. He would congratulate her with the same rehearsed words every time, but something about it felt hollow, like a man playing a role he hadn't chosen. Late-night phone calls had become more frequent. Conversations were cut short whenever footsteps approached. A phone that once sat openly on the kitchen counter was now always turned face down, always locked. It was subtle, quiet enough that no one else seemed to notice. But once a pattern reveals itself, it's impossible to unsee. As the family continued cheering around the table, celebrating baby number 5, a heavy realization settled deep in the chest. This wasn't a joyful announcement. It felt like another sentence being handed down. And this time, the truth hiding behind that pregnancy was about to destroy everything. For a long time, the pregnancies looked like nothing more than chaos. Bad timing, poor choices, a sister who simply couldn't seem to slow down long enough to take responsibility. That was the explanation everyone accepted, because it was easier than asking harder questions. But patterns have a way of exposing themselves when someone is forced to live inside them long enough. Each pregnancy followed the same strange rhythm. The announcement would arrive during a moment when the household was already overwhelmed, bills piling up, school schedules colliding, sleepless nights stacking on top of each other. Then suddenly, another baby would be on the way, and the attention would shift back to celebration instead of concern. At first, the situation felt unfair. Later, it started to feel suspicious. Something else had always been hiding inside those announcements, a strange tension between the husband and his wife that no one seemed willing to address. He never looked happy when the news broke. Not relieved, not proud, just tense, like someone waiting for a storm he knew was coming. Then the small details began to connect. There were the late nights when voices carried down the hallway after the children were asleep, angry whispers that stopped the second anyone stepped closer. The way his phone was always guarded, as if it held secrets that couldn't survive daylight. The long business trips that arrived immediately after every pregnancy announcement, sometimes lasting weeks longer than necessary. But the truth didn't appear all at once. It arrived quietly one afternoon while sorting through paperwork that had accidentally been left behind on the kitchen counter. Receipts, hotel bookings, flight confirmations, none of them connected to work. All of them dated around the same times those pregnancies began. And suddenly, the entire story rearranged itself into something far uglier. The pregnancies hadn't just been reckless choices, they had been weapons. Each one tied the husband tighter to a life he was clearly trying to escape. Every baby became another chain keeping him inside a marriage he no longer wanted, but couldn't leave without looking like a monster. Meanwhile, the real costs landed somewhere else entirely. 4 children were already growing up in a home that wasn't truly theirs, raised by someone who had never asked for that responsibility. And now, a 5th child was on the way, born into the same twisted arrangement built on manipulation and silence. But the most disturbing realization came last. The husband wasn't the only one hiding secrets. And once the truth finally surfaced, no one in the family would be able to pretend this was just another accident. The 5th announcement didn't land the way the others had. The room still filled with the same loud reactions, congratulations, excited gasps. A few relatives even wiped away happy tears as if they were witnessing something beautiful. But this time, the noise felt distant, like standing in the middle of a celebration that no longer made sense. Because by then, the pattern had become impossible to ignore. 4 children were already living under the same roof, following routines built by someone who had slowly been pushed into a role no one else wanted. School mornings started before sunrise. Lunchboxes lined the kitchen counter. Homework filled the evenings while little voices asked questions their own parents should have been answering. And every time another pregnancy was announced, the same silent agreement formed in the background. The children would end up here. That realization settled heavily during the dinner where baby number 5 was revealed. Across the table, the husband barely touched his food. His smile appeared when people looked his way, but it vanished the second attention moved elsewhere. The tension in his shoulders was obvious to anyone paying close enough attention, but no one else seemed to be looking. Later that night, the house finally fell quiet after the children went to sleep. The same familiar hallway light glowed softly against the walls. The same backpacks waited by the door for the morning. Everything looked peaceful on the surface. Yet the truth had already started clawing its way out. Evidence had been sitting quietly in a drawer for weeks. Flight confirmations, hotel receipts, phone records that told a story far different from the one the family believed. A husband who vanished every time another pregnancy appeared. Trips that lined up too perfectly with the moments he should have been home preparing for another child. At first, the discovery felt like betrayal. Then it became something else entirely. Clarity. Because the pregnancies hadn't just trapped him in a life he was trying to escape, they had trapped everyone else too, forcing an entire family to pretend everything was normal while the responsibility kept shifting onto the same person again and again. But the 5th pregnancy changed something. For the first time in years, the answer wasn't quiet acceptance. The evidence was copied, organized, and sealed inside a folder that would soon land in front of the entire family, along with one simple truth they could no longer ignore. This time, the baby wouldn't be the only surprise waiting for them. If this story shocked you as much as it shocked the family in the end, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more unbelievable family dramas, hidden betrayals, and stories that reveal the secrets people try to keep buried. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next story, because sometimes the truth inside a family is far darker than anyone expects. Thanks for watching, and remember, the next story might be even more unbelievable.